Kia ora, Anna. Hi, welcome to the Unearth Your Worth podcast. In this series, we're going to be talking story with all different kinds of people. And here's why. Everybody has a story to tell. And when they tell that story, it's like a key within someone else's story. When somebody decides to step out and share their story, um, they can often underestimate the power that's within that story. We might think that it's not special or powerful, or what we've been through isn't um, anything major. Um, However, we do underestimate the power of our story and our experiences and finding the courage to share those stories. We do underestimate ourselves in that regard. So this series of episodes is dedicated to the stories of humanity, the stories of the collective, and you know our stories being the key to our healing, to our revealing, to our growth. Our story starting as the key to our healing, our revealing, our growth, our expansion. So, um, you know, I will go first, I guess, and what you can expect over these episodes is me bringing on people who I've connected with and I've heard a piece of their story, and inviting these people to to choose the courage to share their story, however, whatever pieces that feel relevant in the moment that we make the episode, for them to share as much or as little as about their story as they choose, and for us all that are listening in to receive the medicine that comes from that. No reira, without further ado, let us jump into this first episode where I will share a bit about my story. Now, there's no one here asking me questions or giving me prompts, so I'm totally gonna just um, weave and wing this episode, but I trust that it will be useful. And that's the purpose of stories, right? When we're just talking story, um, there's always medicine in there if we're searching. We just got to listen. One, it's the courage to show up and share that story. Two, is the courage to show up and listen, right? And when we know how to do both of those things, we receive, we are full. So, um, hakiroto, hakiraro. Okay. Or just sort of me taking a few breaths um, to switch the energy over into going into my story. So let's play an easy game here. What I've got to the right of me is my book that I'm writing, Gangster and Grace. So, Gangster and Grace is a book about a gangster who finds the power of grace. And it turns out that Grace is actually very, very, very gangster. So, this book is my story. Um, and it's going to be a series of defining moments that I choose to share. Um, about my experience and about my life, with lessons inside of them, with medicine inside of them. So what I'm writing in my book is no different to what is being shared on this podcast, and no doubt I'll probably share the episodes of Gangster and Grace, the book, as podcast episodes for people to listen to. It's all about story. You know, as humanity, we underestimate the power of story. Um, and something within me for the last little while has just been feeling really called to bring that back. You know, we're getting very complicated out here. Everything's getting a lot more complex with our technologies, the metamer, everything, all of that stuff. but really it's about coming back to simplicity, and the most simplest form of healing, of um, becoming free from our from the limiting thoughts that we have in our head, from the sounds that we have in our head, getting free from those, finding balance can all start with story. Um, so defining moments. I was writing three of them last night. Um, Three of these defining moments out. I'm not too sure if I'm going to share them here, just because they were a little bit tender as I was writing them out and revisiting them. And that, when it comes to story, we got to honor that process as well. That when we find the courage to stand upon our story and tell it for another to hear, to witness, just know that that isn't always easy. Um, it's not always easy to relive our experiences. And so when someone does like tell their story, stand upon their story, tell it for another to hear, that is an honor for that story to be out in the world, because it means that someone has developed, chosen, built a courage enough to stand upon their story and tell it, and that is an honor. So when someone is still in their process of developing courage, um, developing and a courage and choosing to stand upon their story, when someone is still in that process, that is also an honor, and we want to honor the process that takes and not rush that process. That's why I say, people can come onto this podcast, talk story, but as much or as little as they want, and that's what makes it a safe space. No one's ever encouraged or inspired by being forced to speak about things they don't want to speak about, right? It's all in everyone's own good time. So these three pieces that I've written, these three defining moments that I started writing out last night for Gangster and Grace, I don't think I'm going to speak on those, but I am going to feel into what wants to come through here in this podcast episode. What wants to come through? What story wants to be told? Hmm. One that's been with me this morning actually was um, this piece on never giving up, like never giving up. And then that brings me to this post that I saw on Instagram, which said, um, no, we won't go into that story because that's not my story. Let's go with the story about resilience. So there's a story here about resilience, a story about um, resilience, which also has has had me face some of my worst, well, not worst fears, but big fears. Um, so to a story, there's always a point, right? There's always a point and a purpose, and the reason or the gift in the story is this resilience, and the path there is um, understanding and revisiting, right? Revisiting the fear inside of the story. So one story here occurs back in 2020. I did a bit of a ping pong thing where I packed up my whole life, back home to Aotearoa after living in Melbourne for 14 years or so. moved back to Aotearoa, stayed there for 6 months, and then moved back to Melbourne. So this story takes place after I had just moved back to Melton. This is Melbourne, um, in 2020. It was about March 2020. No, it was about June 2020, where this story takes place, and my social media accounts got shut down completely. Like just one morning, um, I was messaging, a wahine, a woman, a sister, who'd sent me a message about a podcast episode, um, and I messaged her back, and then something like my phone glitched, and then all of a sudden I couldn't log back into my social media accounts at all. When I did, it just told me that, yeah, that my accounts were gone. Instagram, Facebook business, everything. And I I honestly first thought was like, who am I? What am I gonna do without this business? Without what, because I lost that was the source of I was full time in my business, and I had just lost everything. Wow, it's a bit dramatic, but work wise, all my work was on there, all my everything. I had an email list, but I didn't bother to grow it. So if you're listening to this, always make sure that's the reason why you want an email list, is because you got no control over what happens on social media platforms. Email list is the safest source of keeping all your contacts together. So anyway, I lost everything, and I was like, who am I? And that was I had to really face that fear. And I guess since that time, like, sure, I've built a new presence on Facebook, and Instagram, but it hasn't been the same. It really hasn't been the same. Um, it's like there's this issue with consistency where I'll, you know, stop and start things, and it's almost like it's got this flavor of, shall I just sabotage this before, it can be taken away from me again? Um, and if you've ever done any or heard me speak about shadow work before, um, until we turn and face the thing that is here, that is coming for us in life, then it will just keep coming. So this story, I guess, and I get to the root of things quite quickly, but this not knowing who I am without this online presence, um, was a fear that I felt when all of my social media accounts got erased. And it's a fear I've probably been battling with, um, for a little while. Like I've sat here and I've ummed and ahed about how could I maintain this mahi that I do, but be offline. Hence why I wanted to do more podcasts, more YouTube. So I know it's not completely offline, but it's more offline than showing up on stories and posting on these platforms where people can just watch in life. It's like if you're on YouTube, you're there to learn, and you're sourcing it out. It's not me singing and dancing in front of you. So I've been umming and ahhing about how to show up less there, and every time I'm met with that question, like, who am I if I'm not on here giving so much of myself? Um, yeah. And I've even seen people like I've I've seen people that just don't exist on social media, like they don't have a social media presence, and I'm like, how? How do you do that? You know? How do you do that? And I'm in awe of them, and I'm also like, how does that work? How would that work? And yeah, like I'm not really here to bust out the code of what's happening here, but and at this point I'm going, how is this episode even relevant? I've just got to trust that it will be, you know? I've just got to trust that it will be relevant to somebody. But that is a piece of my story, that a defining moment that is still shaping me to this day. I'm not gonna say I had a huge following, um, but it was comfortable, it was all right. But then there was also this feeling of um not wanting half of those people to follow me also when I did have my social media accounts, my previous ones. Now I've got a very small following on Instagram, especially like 300 people or so. But those people show up and comment, and I guess when we judge ourselves by the external like parameters that society says are cool, like having 10,000 followers or millions of followers, um, that's when we can get down on ourselves. But I honestly love, I do not see any issue with me opening up my Instagram and seeing 300 people, because those 300 people, they're actually watching my stuff. They're actually watching my stories. They're actually engaging with my content. You know what I mean? On Facebook, I've got a whole heap more people, but a lot of them I don't even know. And when I come across a bunch of people that I don't know, I just remove, because I just, or people that I've seen but don't really contribute, then I remove it. For me, it's about more intimate, having more of an intimate community. So, anyway, back to these standards that society sets out. Like, if we go by those standards, we're going to get upset. We get upset because we feel like we're not working to those standards. Um, I'm 7 years into being online, and there's people that have, started during COVID, and they've got way, way bigger following them. But that's okay, because that's their journey and not mine. Um, so back to that story about um, having social media, before my accounts were just completely shut down, there was this sense of there was this ungratefulness about having these accounts, and getting hoha and fed up with some of the people, some of the followers, and it was this, yeah, I was like this relief and also this absolute shock when I lost them, you know, and this asking of me to rebuild myself again. And so that's what I've done. That defining moment still gets me some days. Like, it still haunts me. It's like, oh, what if you know if only I could look at my old life. I don't have any social media presence before 2020. Like, it feels like I was born online in 2020, when that's just not the case. And another story that I battle with is like, you know, especially having authority online, it's like talking about um experiences that I've had, or work that I was doing back in the lab, before 2020, but it doesn't exist. And it's like just getting okay with that discomfort, and just really standing in the confidence of knowing what I've done and what I've been about. And yeah, there is some of my work still on YouTube from before 2020. But that's about it. Oh, an old Facebook business page, but a lot of that is not available. But yeah, it's just this discomfort of like, who would I be without this online presence? Without, yeah, without me being on here. It's just, yeah. So the resilient part of that is that having all social media accounts shut down whilst full time, that was my full time income. Like that was my full time gig. Um, During COVID, I guess I let myself breathe for a day and then I just got back up on with it. You know what I mean? Like I got back up and got on with it. These external things are not what make or break us. These external platforms do not dictate the wisdom and the power. They cannot dictate the wisdom that I carry within me and that I can go and share anywhere. Um, and actually, what I'm coming to learn is that and see over the years, in the last 3 years, is the power of being out in community, sharing a story, and that creates connection. Like for me to create, I create connection in person, in community, way quicker than I do online. So this space, this online space for me, is for me to like get out my thoughts, put out my teachings. For those that do want to connect with me, or do find me and get to like sample what I'm about. But in person, in community, that is where, it's at. For me, that's where I'm strongest because I'm in person with people. My energy can be felt. Um, the resilience piece in this story is that I didn't let the setback of losing my social media platforms define me because I had done years of work around not letting external factors define me. And when that hit, I was somewhat prepared to let them go and to keep going, you know. Oh, mm, yeah. So that feels complete. I could have told you the stories about, you know, when my brother went to jail and I felt guilty for that when I was 18 years old and sort of had to work through that guilt. I could have told you the story about, the three abortions, three different girls I was, had to compete with an ex partner. I could have told you about the time when two of my brothers were held up at gunpoint and how that affected me tremendously. Um, could have told you these more hard hitting stories that I do carry. However, this is the story that I have for you today. This is the story that I'm opening up with today. Um, the fact that we're speaking or you're listening to a podcast um, from someone who only puts it out to 200 people online and still knows my worth as someone who had thousands of people following her, that there's mana in that. There's strength in that, right? Um, I am someone who doesn't follow the normal ways of doing things. People want to build followers. I do not. I do not. I want the chosen few to go deep with. That's who I am. But I'll still show up and have a lot of people online judge and assess me and that's cool, because the ones who are the chosen few who are going to go deep with me and be connected in my community for a good part of their life, um, everything that I put out, every time I get back up when there's a setback, it's because there are people that want to be journeying deep. They don't want to stay around on the surface. They want to journey deep. And that's what I'm here to do, right? And that's why I find a way. That's why I don't give up. That's why the the drive of this mission that I'm on is way is deep rooted into the land, and I am never going to not do this mission. Like, I see me doing this work when I'm 80. You know what I mean? Um, this is the work of my life, right? And um, guiding people to face the unknown is my life's work, you know. Um, and I get to do it because I've stood back up over and over again when I've been slammed all the way down. I get to do it because I stand back up time and again, and I come back stronger, I come back wiser, and I know it. Yeah, I come back stronger, I come back wiser, and I know it. And I can feel it in my body. And yeah, that that's what makes me appear arrogant a lot of the time. But I don't care because I just don't care because it's not like I am very sure of myself. Yeah, I am because I've been smacked all the way down and then gotten all the way back up. So I can be sure of myself because I'm sure that I got off the ground, that I'm still standing, still doing this work that I have loved, that I have wanted to do since 2015. This is the work I chose to do. I made a choice to do this work. I was doing network marketing and I said, I just want to help people where they want to be helped. I don't want to just help these people because they buy my products. I want to help people, these specific range of products. I just want to help people where they want to be helped. I would go in there to like talk about the products I was selling, but I would end up talking about, this like what's going on in their life. And I'm like, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to guide people where they wanted to be guided. And for all of these years, that is what I've done. You know, I've put myself out there, I've created offers, I've sold those offers, I've sold myself and my ability, and I've gotten smacked over, whacked down, brought all the way back down to ground level, stood back up, got whacked back down again, stood all the way back up, and every time getting up stronger, getting up more wiser, and knowing it. And so, with that, I'm going to leave this episode here. Trust you've taken something from it. And next up, we will have other gangsters, um, other graceful gangsters that I've connected with, sharing their story for us to connect to. Ngā mihi kia